It began on an ordinary winter evening in 1990. Redwillow, a small reservation town in Wyoming, was covered in a thick layer of snow. The streets were quiet, the air biting, and only the faint glow of the diner and the gas station broke the darkness. Most families were inside, warming themselves by stoves, while the steady wind moved across the open plains. Nothing about the evening suggested that history would be made there, or that a story would unfold which would haunt the town for the next 3 decades. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the body of 22-year-old Maya Tallfeather was discovered near Redwillow Creek. Her life had ended violently, and the town's sense of security was shaken. Tribal police and county sheriffs arrived quickly. Their approaches differed, their resources unequal, and from the start there were questions about cooperation. The creek, normally just a frozen ribbon of water that children skated on, became a scene surrounded by yellow tape. Searchers had first noticed footprints pressed into the snow. They seemed to follow the creek for a short distance before stopping. When deputies traced the line of prints, they found Maya lying on the bank. She was wearing her blue winter coat, the one her grandmother had given her the previous Christmas. There were clear signs of trauma, but no weapon lay nearby. The snow around her showed disturbances, as though there had been a struggle. No tracks led away, leaving investigators puzzled about how the attacker had left the area. Word spread through Redwillow faster than official reports. By morning, conversations at the diner were hushed, the usual clatter of plates quieter. Parents kept their children close. The case had barely begun, but the community already sensed it would not be solved quickly. In a place with just a few hundred residents, everyone either knew Maya personally or knew her family. Sheriff's deputies canvassed the area, asking if anyone had seen vehicles near the service road the night before. One rancher reported hearing an engine, but could not identify the type. The sound carried strangely in the wind. A neighbor remembered glimpsing a figure in a blue coat walking toward the creek around 9:30, but the details blurred in the snow. Each account provided fragments, none enough to explain what had happened. Investigators collected fibers from Maya's coat, bagged samples of snow mixed with faint traces of blood, and photographed the surrounding area. The evidence went into envelopes and boxes, stored in the county office. At the time, those steps seemed routine. In the years that followed, those boxes would wait, untouched, for science to advance enough to find answers. The town felt the weight of uncertainty from the start. In a close community, rumors rose quickly. Some suspected an outsider passing through. Others whispered of conflicts within families. None of these ideas were supported by hard evidence, yet they circulated and created unease. The sheriff's office released few details, hoping to preserve the integrity of the investigation, but the lack of information left gaps filled by speculation. As days passed, the cold deepened. Volunteers joined official searches, retracing steps, examining barns, and combing along fence lines. They found nothing beyond the first set of footprints and the site near the creek. The snow preserved silence as well as it preserved prints, and whatever happened that night remained hidden beneath it. At the county office, a map of Redwillow was pinned to a corkboard. Pushpins marked the diner, the Tallfeather home, and the location by the creek. Photographs of Maya, including her college portrait, were fixed to the board's center. Detectives added notes on yellow paper, logging times and statements. The image of her face, steady and unchanging, became the focal point of an investigation with no suspect. The first weeks gave no breakthrough. No weapon was recovered, no confession offered. Forensic tools available in 1990 were limited. The case quickly moved from urgent to stagnant. But for the people of Redwillow, the shock did not fade. A sense of safety was replaced with quiet vigilance. Children were walked to school instead of sent alone. Paths by the creek went unused. The tragedy of Maya Tallfeather's death entered the memory of the town that very night. What remained was not only grief, but also confusion, a puzzle no one could yet solve. By the next morning, the town of Redwillow would never be the same. To understand the impact, we need to know Maya and her world. Maya Tallfeather was 22 years old, a college student studying education in Montana. She had returned home to Redwillow for winter break. She stayed with her grandmother, Evelyn, who had raised her since childhood. Maya was known for her warm smile, her patient way of listening, and the sketches she kept in a worn notebook. Horses were her favorite subject, drawn in pencil with careful attention. She was not a person who sought the spotlight. At the diner, she preferred the corner booth, often sharing coffee with her cousin, Thomas. She laughed easily, though always quietly, never drawing attention. Friends recalled she had a way of making them feel heard. She spoke of wanting to teach in schools close to reservations, believing children needed role models who shared their culture and experiences. Redwillow itself was a modest town. A single street formed the center, with a post office, one gas station, and the diner. Beyond that stretched the plains. Winters were harsh, summers dry, and the community relied on each other for both support and survival. In January 1990, the town's population barely exceeded 700. Everyone recognized familiar vehicles, and strangers were noticed immediately. Maya's family had deep roots. Evelyn Tallfeather was respected in the community, a woman known for her resilience. She attended church on Sundays, cooked large meals for extended relatives, and maintained the small home where Maya grew up. Evelyn worried often, but she trusted Maya's independence. Allowing her to walk home from the diner was not unusual, only part of their routine. The night before Maya's disappearance was ordinary. She and Thomas met at the diner for dinner. They ordered stew, shared stories about school, and discussed family plans. The waitress remembered Maya laughing at one of Thomas's jokes. Around 9:15, Maya gathered her bag, adjusted her coat, and mentioned heading home. She declined a ride, saying she wanted the short walk for the fresh air. That simple decision became the moment fixed in memory. The distance was less than a mile, a route she had walked countless times. Streetlights illuminated part of the road, but the final stretch toward the Tallfeather home was darker. The night carried no sense of alarm, only routine. Within an hour, the first signs that something was wrong began to surface when she failed to arrive. Knowing Maya through these small details is essential. She was not defined only by the tragedy. She was a young woman with goals, friendships, and habits that made her real to those who loved her. Her sketches filled the pages of her notebooks. She spoke often of one day teaching children to value their own voices. Her presence at the diner was part of the fabric of Redwillow, ordinary but cherished. The town itself shaped the way the case unfolded. With such a small population, information spread quickly. Every action was visible. When the investigation began, people knew who had been questioned, who had seen what, and which rumors carried weight. The intimacy of the town made the crime feel closer, the shock sharper. The image of Maya at the diner, laughing with Thomas, became the last vivid memory many held of her. It was ordinary in every way, which made the contrast with what followed even harder to accept. That quiet world shifted forever on January 12th. The evening seemed ordinary, until the timeline stopped adding up. On January 12th, 1990, Maya left the diner at 9:15. She carried her bag over her shoulder, pulled her blue coat close, and stepped into the cold. Snow had begun to fall again, light but steady, and the streets reflected the glow of sparse lamps. Thomas watched her go, never imagining it would be the last time. A neighbor across the street later recalled seeing a figure in a blue coat around 9:30, moving steadily toward the road that led to the Tallfeather home. The neighbor could not confirm it was Maya, but the description matched. After that, no confirmed sightings were made. At 10 o'clock, Evelyn grew worried. Maya was punctual, and the short walk should have taken 10 minutes. By 10:30, Evelyn phoned Thomas, asking if Maya had stayed longer at the diner. Thomas said she had left on time. At 11, Evelyn contacted the sheriff's office, reporting Maya missing. For a small town, this was immediate, not delayed. Deputies arrived before midnight. They checked the direct road and side paths. Snow covered any tracks, but near the creek, they found a faint line of footprints leading halfway toward the water. The prints ended suddenly, as though erased. This detail troubled investigators from the start. The weather played its part. Temperatures dropped to 12 degrees Fahrenheit, and drifting snow covered older impressions. Visibility was poor. Searchers used flashlights, but the landscape offered little reference in the dark. Volunteers joined through the night, combing the fields. By sunrise, the search area expanded. A deputy discovered Maya's body near the creek bank. Her coat was partially open, her bag nearby. There were signs of blunt trauma, but no weapon. The snow around her suggested a struggle. Yet beyond the footprints leading in, there were none leaving. This paradox remained one of the earliest mysteries. The initial theory considered an attacker arriving by vehicle. Tire tracks were found on a nearby service road. The weather made them difficult to match. Investigators logged them and photographed the impressions. At the time, The county database could not link them to any registered vehicle. The timeline left investigators with gaps. Maya left at 9:15. By 9:30, she was seen in the distance. By 10, she had not arrived home. By 11, she was reported missing. And by dawn, her body was found. Every step was anchored, yet the space in between remained empty. This chapter of the story remains the most haunting for Redwillow. For those who live there, the knowledge that Maya disappeared in the span of a short walk, within view of familiar houses, never felt acceptable. By sunrise, searchers followed footprints that led only halfway across the snow. The search began with urgency and cooperation, at least on the surface. In those first hours after Maya's body was discovered, tribal police and county sheriffs worked together to secure the creek. Evidence markers were placed near the footprints, the bag, and the disturbed snow. Photographs were taken from multiple angles. Deputies sketched a rough map of the area, noting distances between the creek, the footprints, and the nearest service road. The cooperation, however, carried tension. Tribal officers believed the case should remain under their jurisdiction, as Maya was a member of the Tallfeather family. County sheriffs argued the location was within their authority. This dispute was quiet at first, but the difference in approach soon affected how evidence was handled. Items collected by one group were not always logged with the other, and the flow of information became uneven. Maya's coat was tested for fibers and hair. Small samples were sealed and stored. Her bag contained notebooks, pencils, and a wallet. The items were returned to evidence storage without obvious signs of theft. There were no fingerprints recovered from the exterior of the bag. Deputies noted that the zipper was open, though Evelyn confirmed Maya often carried it that way. Interviews began immediately. Family members were questioned first. Evelyn described Maya's routine and insisted she had no enemies. Thomas explained their dinner at the diner, his cousin leaving around 9:15, and his return home. Staff at the diner confirmed the timeline. Other townspeople gave statements about seeing a figure near the creek, though details varied. Forensic capacity was limited. Photographs were printed on film and filed. Soil samples from the creek bank were sealed in glass containers. A few hair strands found on Maya's coat were sent to the state lab, though the technology of the time could not provide conclusive results. These items would later form the foundation of renewed efforts, but in 1990 they offered no answers. The autopsy confirmed blunt force trauma as the cause of death. The report noted bruising and a single deep wound to the head. No defensive marks were clearly visible, though cold conditions may have obscured details. Toxicology found no drugs or alcohol in her system. The report gave no indication of sexual assault. Without additional evidence, the cause was listed plainly, with no path to the person responsible. As weeks passed, the investigation slowed. The tribal community called for persistence, holding vigils near the creek. The county emphasized procedure, but their resources were stretched thin. Other cases demanded attention, and leads in Maya's case remained limited. Tips trickled in, sightings of unknown vehicles, strangers passing through town, but none could be verified. The tension between agencies grew more visible. Families asked why more arrests had not been made, why interviews were not repeated, why evidence was not shared. Both offices assured the community that the case was active. In practice, progress was minimal. Within Redwillow, fear settled in quietly. Families reminded children to walk in groups. Paths by the creek became avoided altogether. The diner remained open, but conversations were subdued. Everyone knew the investigation had stalled, even if officials did not say so directly. By February, the snow melted slightly, revealing nothing new. The case file grew with reports, photographs, and notes, but no suspect was identified. Without stronger evidence, investigators had little to present to prosecutors. Maya's death was a puzzle without pieces to connect. The quiet that followed was heavy. For Evelyn Tallfeather, life narrowed to grief and unanswered questions. For Redwillow, the unsolved case became an open wound, unhealed and persistent. But within weeks, the case began to stall. Time, as it always does, carried forward. The 1990s unfolded across Wyoming with economic changes, new schools, and shifting demographics. Yet in Redwillow, the name Maya Tallfeather was never forgotten. Each January, Evelyn organized a candlelight vigil near the diner. Dozens gathered, holding candles against the wind, sharing memories, and quietly demanding justice. Detectives cycled through the case. Some were assigned for a few months, others for a year. Each time, the same files were reopened, the same photographs reviewed, and the same questions repeated. No new evidence surfaced. Notes were updated, then filed again. The case remained open but cold. In 1994, a potential lead emerged when a drifter was arrested in a nearby town for burglary. He vaguely matched a description given by a resident who claimed to see someone near the creek in 1990. Detectives investigated, but fingerprints and timelines did not align. The lead was dismissed, though it briefly raised community hopes before fading away. Throughout the late 1990s, Redwillow changed. Younger residents left to seek jobs in larger cities. The diner changed owners twice, though it remained the social center. The gas station expanded to include a small grocery section. Population declined gradually, yet the case remained a common point of conversation. When newcomers arrived, older residents quietly explained the story, ensuring Maya's name was remembered. For Evelyn, life became marked by anniversaries. Each year brought gatherings. Each year ended without resolution. She kept Maya's sketches in a box under her bed, taking them out on quiet evenings. Family photos remained in the living room, unchanged, a frozen reminder of what was lost. By 2000, the Tallfeather home stood as a symbol of endurance. Relatives visited often, supporting Evelyn, but even their presence could not erase the silence surrounding the investigation. Tribal leaders occasionally petitioned county officials to revisit the case, but resources were limited and priorities shifted elsewhere. In 2005, another detective briefly examined the file. He noted inconsistencies in the logging of early evidence, but the missing details were too old to recover. Rumors again surfaced about local involvement, but none were substantiated. The file returned to storage. Despite these years of inactivity, the community did not forget. The annual vigils grew into moments of reflection for the entire town. Young people who had never met Maya lit candles and stood silently beside elders. Her story was passed down in classrooms, often as a cautionary tale about safety and remembrance. The case became part of Redwillow's identity, not as an open scandal, but as an unresolved wound. People adapted to living with it, the way they adapted to long winters and dry summers. Yet underneath, the unease never fully lifted. By 2010, nearly 2 decades had passed. The files remained intact, the evidence stored, and the unanswered questions unchanged. The memory of Maya Tallfeather persisted, not through headlines, but through the resilience of a community that refused to let her name be forgotten. But after 20 years, something quietly shifted. 2 decades later, new tools allowed old evidence to speak again. In 2010, Wyoming established a cold case unit tasked with re-examining long unsolved investigations. Among the files sent for review was the case of Maya Tallfeather. Detective Laura Myers, recently assigned to the unit, opened the box containing the photographs, fibers, and sealed envelopes collected in 1990. The evidence was carefully cataloged, each envelope carrying barcodes that had not been scanned in years. Advances in DNA analysis meant even small samples could yield results. Fibers from Maya's coat were swabbed again. A partial male profile emerged, faint but present. It was not enough for immediate identification, but it was a lead absent for 20 years. Detective Myers began rebuilding the case step by step. She reviewed original statements, timelines, and maps. She visited Redwillow, meeting with Evelyn Tallfeather. Evelyn, now elderly, welcomed her with cautious hope. Myers promised no quick answers, only persistence. That visit built trust, and for the first time in years, Evelyn believed progress might be possible. The cold case team cross-referenced the partial profile with national databases. No direct match appeared. However, the system flagged a connection to sealed juvenile records from 1989. Confidentiality laws limited immediate access, but court requests eventually opened the files. Inside was the record of a teenage boy involved in an assault incident the year before Maya's death. The name was Daniel Crowley. At the time, he had been 16, charged with attacking another youth with a blunt object during a fight. The case was sealed, the punishment minor, and he moved on without lasting consequence. In 1991, he left Redwillow entirely, settling later in Montana. Detective Myers focused on Crowley's timeline. School records placed him in Redwillow in 1990. Vehicle records later linked him to a truck registered near the area at the time. Though none of this was conclusive, the pattern aligned with the DNA finding. The process was meticulous. Each link was verified with documents, not rumor. Employment records, addresses, and driver's licenses built a clear path of Crowley's movements. Witness accounts from 1990 were revisited, including the neighbor who saw a figure in a blue coat. None directly identified Crowley, but the context added weight to the growing file. The cold case team prepared their findings for further testing. Additional swabs from the evidence confirmed the partial profile consistently matched Crowley's juvenile records. The likelihood of error was low. Though the case was not yet trial-ready, it had shifted from dormant to active. For the Tallfeather family, the news brought quiet relief. Evelyn expressed gratitude, careful not to let hope grow too quickly. For Redwillow, the revival reminded residents that the case was not forgotten. The diner once again hosted conversations about Maya, this time with a sense that resolution might finally come. The investigation continued patiently, methodically, and with renewed determination. The name behind the records would lead them back to Redwillow. By 2012, the cold case team had built enough momentum to move forward. With Daniel Crowley's name now central to the file, investigators reached out to Montana authorities, where he was living quietly under a modest construction job. He was 40 years old, married, with 2 children, and no serious criminal record beyond minor traffic offenses. To neighbors, he appeared ordinary. To detectives, he was the missing piece that had lingered for decades. Detective Myers requested cooperation from Montana State Police. Together, they began discreet surveillance. Crowley's daily routines were mapped carefully: his commute to work, his stops at grocery stores, his walks around the neighborhood. Nothing outwardly suspicious appeared, yet each observation was meticulously logged. The goal was not to catch him in action, but to collect discarded DNA. Opportunity arrived one evening in early spring. After eating at a roadside diner, Crowley tossed a soda can into a public trash bin. Investigators collected it minutes later, sealing it for analysis. Weeks passed while the lab processed the sample. When results returned, the comparison was undeniable. The DNA from the can matched the partial profile recovered from Maya Tallfeather's coat in 1990. The likelihood of coincidence was mathematically negligible. Armed with this confirmation, the cold case team prepared their case for prosecutors. The legal process was deliberate, requiring airtight evidence. Old witnesses were re-interviewed, not for sensational statements, but to confirm consistency. Maps of the creek were redrawn with modern software, showing paths and timelines more clearly than in the original sketches. The case file swelled with both old reports and new analysis. By summer, an arrest warrant was issued. On a quiet morning in Montana, Crowley was taken into custody outside his home. Neighbors watched silently as officers placed him in the back of a patrol car. He offered little resistance, speaking few words. At the county jail, he requested a lawyer immediately, avoiding direct questions. News of the arrest reached Redwillow within hours. Phones rang, conversations at the diner hushed, and for the first time in 22 years, a sense of breakthrough pulsed through the community. Evelyn received the call directly from Detective Myers. She wept quietly, thanking the detective, then sat in silence for a long while. For her, the moment was not celebration but the beginning of long-awaited answers. The legal system moved cautiously. Crowley was extradited to Wyoming, where formal charges were filed: first-degree murder. Court dates were scheduled, motions prepared, and the weight of a decades-old case pressed into a modern courtroom. The defense argued the evidence was circumstantial, that memories had faded, and that DNA on a coat could have arrived through innocent contact. Prosecutors countered with careful presentation: the timeline, the assault history, the consistency of the recovered profile. For the people of Redwillow, the arrest itself was significant, even before a verdict. It symbolized recognition that Maya's life mattered, that her case had not been forgotten, and that persistence could overcome time. Conversations at vigils shifted from despair to cautious hope. Children who had grown into adults carried candles beside their own children, a sign of how deeply the story had spanned generations. In that summer of 2012, Redwillow felt change. Not resolution, not yet, but momentum. After decades of waiting, the trial of Daniel Crowley would decide what justice could mean for Maya Tallfeather. The process of truth had finally begun. The trial of Daniel Crowley opened in 2013 in a county courthouse filled with quiet tension. Reporters occupied benches alongside townspeople, family members, and tribal representatives. For many, it was their first time hearing the evidence in detail, though whispers of the case had circulated for years. The prosecution began with context. Photographs of the creek were displayed, maps projected, and testimony from officers explained the timeline. Jurors listened as forensic experts described how DNA methods had advanced since 1990. The partial profile found on Maya's coat, once useless, now pointed directly to Crowley with near certainty. Witnesses followed. Diner staff recalled seeing Maya the night of her disappearance. Thomas Tallfeather spoke, describing their last evening together. His words were steady but carried decades of grief. Community members repeated their memories of a figure near the creek, their accounts aligning with Crowley's presence in town at the time. The defense challenged each point. They argued that DNA on clothing could result from casual contact, that memories after so many years were unreliable, and that police had failed in the early investigation. Their cross-examinations emphasized gaps: the missing logs, the lack of fingerprints, the absence of direct eyewitnesses. They painted a picture of uncertainty, hoping to weaken the prosecution's narrative. Prosecutors responded with clarity. They acknowledged flaws in the original investigation but emphasized persistence. Evidence, though delayed, had spoken. The juvenile assault history revealed a pattern of violence. The DNA match was not casual but consistent across multiple tests. Jurors were reminded that coincidence could not explain such alignment. Evelyn attended each day, sitting quietly in the front row. Her presence became a symbol, not of anger, but of endurance. Reporters noted her composure, her way of clutching Maya's sketchbook in her lap. For the community, seeing her there reinforced the importance of the trial. After weeks of testimony, closing arguments framed the story. The prosecution asked jurors to consider not only science, but also the passage of time, how justice delayed was still justice. The defense urged caution, warning against convicting based on incomplete memories. The jury deliberated for 2 full days. The courthouse waited in silence, conversations muted, footsteps echoing through hallways. When the verdict finally arrived, the words were spoken slowly and clearly: guilty of first-degree murder. Evelyn wept quietly. Her tears were not of triumph, but of release. For more than 20 years, she had carried the weight of silence. The verdict did not erase grief, but it confirmed truth. Maya's story had been heard, her life acknowledged, and her death given recognition through justice. Crowley was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He spoke little during sentencing, offering no apology. His expression remained flat, unreadable. For many in Redwillow, his silence mattered less than the decision itself. The law had spoken, and the community could begin to heal. The aftermath was both immediate and gradual. Vigils continued, now carrying candles of remembrance rather than protest. Conversations at the diner softened, shifting from frustration to reflection. For younger generations, the trial became a lesson in perseverance. For elders, it was closure that had seemed impossible. The trial did not erase the past. Nothing could, but it transformed memory from an open wound to a scar, visible, lasting, but no longer bleeding. In 2013, justice was not perfect. It was, however, real. The years after the trial were quieter in Redwillow. Life returned to its rhythms: school buses on morning roads, farmers tending fields, families gathering at the diner. Yet the presence of Maya Tallfeather remained woven into the town's identity. Evelyn, though aged and tired, found a measure of peace. She continued hosting vigils, now smaller and gentler. Instead of demanding answers, they celebrated Maya's life. Candles still flickered against winter wind, but conversations carried warmth rather than despair. Children learned Maya's story not as an unresolved mystery, but as a completed chapter. The diner kept a framed photograph of Maya near the entrance, donated by the Tallfeather family. Beneath it, a plaque read simply, "Never forgotten." Travelers passing through sometimes paused, asking about the young woman in the picture. Locals would explain, their voices calm, telling a story of tragedy, persistence, and justice. Detective Myers visited occasionally, stopping by to see Evelyn. Their conversations were brief but meaningful, a reminder that determination could bridge decades. For Myers, the case became part of her career legacy. For Evelyn, it became proof that even the quietest voices could eventually be heard. Redwillow itself changed slowly. New families moved in, drawn by affordable homes. Older residents passed away, leaving stories behind. Yet the creek where Maya was found remained untouched, its banks quiet, its water flowing steadily. Some avoided it still, while others walked there as an act of remembrance. Nature, indifferent, carried on, holding both memory and renewal. Maya's legacy grew beyond Redwillow. Tribal leaders referenced her case when advocating for stronger collaboration between tribal police and county sheriffs. Law enforcement training programs cited it as an example of why evidence preservation mattered. Students wrote essays about it, connecting her story to larger conversations about justice for Indigenous women. The scar of her loss remained, but it became a guiding mark rather than an open wound. In classrooms, in community halls, and at family gatherings, Maya's name was spoken not only with sadness but with pride. Her art, preserved by Evelyn, was displayed once in a local exhibition, showing sketches of landscapes and portraits that revealed her quiet talent. For the Tallfeather family, closure did not mean forgetting. It meant balance. They carried grief with them, but they also carried strength. Maya's younger cousins spoke about her often, reminding their children that her story was not only about tragedy, but about resilience and the power of persistence. As the decades turned again, the case of Maya Tallfeather faded from headlines, but not from memory. In Redwillow, the creek, the diner, and the small home on the edge of town all remained reminders of the past. For outsiders, it was another cold case solved after years. For those who lived it, it was a chapter that shaped lives across generations. In the end, the story was not only about loss, but also about endurance. Maya's life, though cut short, shaped a community. Her absence left silence, but her memory built solidarity. Justice did not arrive quickly, but it arrived nonetheless, carrying with it the message that even after decades, truth can still emerge. And so Redwillow continued. Winters came and went. Candles flickered. Children grew. The creek flowed. And through it all, the name Maya Tallfeather remained, not just a memory of a tragedy, but a symbol of perseverance, justice, and the unyielding human need to remember.